Today, I'm going to be answering your frequently asked questions about how to sound confident when you're communicating and speaking with others. If you're new here, hi, I'm Christina, and as a social psychologist, I'm going to be explaining confident communication from the perspective of your psychology rather than focusing solely on tips and tricks and the type of typical advice you would hear. Let's get right into it. Question 1. Why do I feel so anxious when I'm speaking in front of others? This is one of the most frequently asked questions I get from everyone in every walk of life. Whether you're in the corporate space or you're running your own business, feeling like you have public speaking anxiety is extremely common. And so the first thing that I want to say is this. So much of your public speaking anxiety likely comes from your conditioning and the fact that you don't do public speaking often enough. So those two things combined increase the amount of anxiety you're feeling. So let's break this down. So the first thing that I want to unpack is your social conditioning. And this is essentially the things that you were told, the experiences that you had that led you to believe what you currently believe. And so when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to any sort of speaking in front of someone else, the first thing that I really want you to do is to think about and reflect on the standards that you have set for anything involving public speaking. What I mean is this. Think about when you have a conversation with your best friend. What are the expectations that you have there? And then compare that to the expectations you have for when you're doing any sort of public speaking, whether that's presenting, leading a team meeting, sharing an idea with a client, whatever the case is for you. And compare the two. What you'll find is that the situations where you feel confident, laid back, like speaking is easy, those are the situations where you have really low standards and really low expectations for what good means. But when it comes to public speaking, these are the situations where you have such high standards, such high expectations, such a bar that you have set for yourself that achieving it feels extremely hard, especially when you don't do it frequently and when you've convinced yourself that doing it is hard. See, many of the people that I speak with who have anxiety around public speaking often find that they want to be good public speakers, but they don't actually have a specific definition of what that means for them. That can look a little bit ambiguous, like, I just want to feel confident, I don't want to use too many filler words, I just want to speak up and show up and not feel this anxiety. But that doesn't give you concrete, specific behaviors that you can take. And so if you really want to start overcoming the anxiety that you feel when you're doing any sort of public speaking, number 1, you have to really understand the standards that you have set. But number 2, you need to reevaluate what expectations you have and what an example of good or successful actually means for you. When you understand the goal that you're working towards, maybe you look for a politician, a role model, a celebrity, someone who has the type of public speaking experience that you want for yourself. When you have that concrete example and definition, well, now you know exactly how to work backwards and start with where you currently are, if you're being honest with yourself, so that you can get to the place you want to be. If you just want to show up and be good and not use as many filler words and these very ambiguous standards, it becomes so incredibly easy to criticize yourself and to think that you're not doing good enough. Instead, when you understand exactly what you're achieving, what you're working towards, you can start to create micro goals, little baby steps to get you to where you want to go. So if you have anxiety that's like a 10 out of 10, you're stuttering, your hands are shaking, you're using 30 filler words in a minute, well, now you know that your next goal might be getting your anxiety down to an 8 out of 10. Maybe it's reducing your filler words from 30 a minute to 15 a minute, right? You have to be reasonable with yourself, the expectations that you place on yourself, and the standards that you have for yourself. When you understand the bigger picture and you understand exactly what the goals are that you're working towards, that's when you can start to minimize your anxiety in a way that's sustainable. Because expecting yourself to go from 0 to 100, from public speaking anxiety to expert public speaker, it's not going to happen overnight. And holding yourself to that expectation and carrying that dream with you into every meeting is adding to your anxiety. And so to wrap up this first question, if you'd like to eliminate your public speaking anxiety, First of all, understand the standards that you've set for yourself for that context. Then get very clear on what a good definition of public speaking would look like for you. Do you have a role model? Do you have a specific outline? What are the criteria for good public speaking for you? And then get very clear on the roadmap from where you're starting from to where you want to go so that you can sustainably take micro steps, baby goals, to get to where you want to be. It will be a work in progress, but the important thing is that if you stick to it, recognize you will get there. Question 2, how do I sound more confident when I speak? This is such a good question because confidence goes hand in hand with your communication skills. I like to say that your words are the windows to your subconscious mind, meaning however you think, what you believe, and how you feel about yourself will come through in the way that you talk, through the word choice, through your language patterns, and through the style in which you communicate. So when you lack confidence in yourself, it will come through in your communication skills. And if you lack confidence and you feel like your communication skills are subpar, well, that's a double whammy that makes it feel even harder to communicate with confidence. And so, how do we overcome this? Well, we have to do a couple things at the same time. The first is working on your confidence. So that includes your self-worth and your personal agency. The second includes working on your actual communication skills. And the third is on building self-trust with yourself. So let me explain each one in more detail. So in order to actually build up your confidence while speaking to others, you have to build up your confidence within yourself. And that starts with building your self-worth. Think of your self-worth as your self-esteem. It's the idea that you have about yourself and how much value you think you bring. If you believe that your self-worth is low, if you don't see the value in yourself, it's hard to be confident, especially when you're speaking with others. Whether you're running your own business or you're showing up and proposing an idea in that team meeting, if you fundamentally don't believe in yourself to begin with, you won't believe in your ideas as much, and presenting them will feel so much harder. It will be easier to dismiss them, to think they're not as valid as they are, or to think that you need way more information, expertise, or data to back it up. Essentially, you'll feel like you need way more to feel ready than you actually do. Your personal agency is how much control you think you have over the things that you're doing, your circumstances, your environment. If you have high personal agency, then you believe that you're capable of doing things. You believe you're capable of getting things done, and that you have an impact over the conditions of where you work, your circumstances, your environment, your business, insert the blank for you here. And so self-worth, what you believe about yourself, how your self-esteem is, it goes hand in hand with your personal agency, how much impact you think you can have based on your own personal actions. When you work on improving your self-esteem and your personal agency, well, now you believe in yourself more, you understand your worth and your value more, and you believe that what you do actually impacts the situation more. Can you see how that works with confidence? And so when you start to build up this sense of confidence in yourself, that will naturally begin to come through in the way that you communicate. However, you do still need to work on your communication skills. Now, let's unpack how to actually improve your communication skills. I want you to think of your communication skills the same way you would of your body at the gym. When you go to the gym, you likely break it down into cardio days, upper body, lower body, some sort of split so that you're working on all the aspects of you equally. You're training and you understand that your body won't change after one gym session. Your body won't change after, a 15-minute workout. It's going to take time, and it's going to take that repetition. The exact same thing applies to your communication. And so I want you to be intentional with adding in time to practice your communication skills. Now, 2 key ways that you can do this: on your own or with a friend that you trust. And essentially what you want to do is you want to take 15 minutes. And if you're on your own, you can just record yourself, watch it back, revise and repeat. Record yourself, watch it back, think about what needs to be revised, and try again. And you just keep that process going for the 15 minutes. If you're practicing with a friend, you do the same thing, but you practice speaking, you work on the one technique that you're working on that day, you get feedback, you reflect on what went well, what didn't, and you try again. It's not complicated, but it's something that most people just avoid because it feels uncomfortable. And so when you are recording yourself or speaking to a friend, there's a few different things that I want you to do. And the most important one is that you pick one thing to work on at a time. Just like if you're going to the gym, odds are you're not doing a full body workout every single day. You want to start breaking up your communication skills into small, tangible pieces that you can work on to improve. And so I'm going to give you 5 key areas to focus on just to get you started. This is your volume, your pace, your tone, your vocabulary, and your filler words. So your volume is how loud or how quiet you talk. Practice experimenting. Talk really loud as if you're projecting to an audience in an auditorium. Practice speaking softer and slowing down when you need to be a little bit more intentional or empathetic. Your pace is how fast or how slow you talk. So practice, play around. Are you easy to understand? Do you talk so slow that people lose their focus and their attention because you're just boring? Or do you talk so fast that people have a hard time actually processing and understanding what you said? So play around, slow down, speed up, have a mix. Your tone is the emotion that you convey in your voice. And so you can record yourself, or you can ask your friend if you're practicing to give you feedback on how you sound, in the sense of what emotion are you conveying? Do you sound angry? Do you sound bored? Do you sound disinterested? How do they feel while listening to you? Do they feel like they're in trouble, like you're chastising or lecturing them? Do they feel bored because you sound disinterested? Your voice carries so much emotion naturally. And if you're not intentional with what you are conveying, the emotional state that you're in will take over. And so if you're someone who perhaps has a little bit of a hard time with public speaking, or if you're someone who tends to be like hot-headed, those emotional states will naturally come through, and it will actually lead to more miscommunication. Now, your vocabulary, this one's easy. Audit yourself for the types of words that you're using and how many words you're using repetitively. So if you're someone who wants to be articulate, well-spoken, and maybe sound more like an authority or an expert, audit your vocabulary. Are you using words that reflect that? Are you simplifying your message too much? Are you using slang when you should be using perhaps the right term or the right vocabulary, right? So play around with that. And the more words that you can incorporate, the more variety, the more synonyms that you can use, the better your articulation becomes. And the last one is your filler words. Filler words are a really interesting one because most people use them without thinking, automatically in moments of transition. That could be when you're going from one thought to the next one and you have a bit of a lag time while you figure it out. Or that could be when you're finishing one sentence and moving on to the next. And so you use filler words like or ah, or you see, you know, to kind of link the two as you're thinking in real time. And so when you're working on removing your filler words, what I want you to do is to say something naturally. Just notice how many filler words you use. And then rather than trying to think of something else and something else and something else, go back and repeat the thing that you said in your own words in the next reiteration, but try to minimize the filler words. And what you're doing by repeating the same thing and eliminating the filler words in the process is you're teaching yourself how to think and how to identify those moments of transition, the moments where one thought ends or one sentence ends, and continue it without adding in that or ah verbally, okay? So this one is one of the trickier ones, but it is a habit, and habits can be broken and retrained. And so if you put in the work and you put in the reps and the repetition and the intentional effort, your filler words will either get eliminated or significantly reduce. And so to build confident communication, yes, you have to work up your own confidence. Yes, you have to work up your actual communication skills so that you sound confident when you feel confident. But the last sort of missing bridge that not enough people talk about is building self-trust. Now, self-trust is so incredibly important here because when you are speaking, you have to believe yourself and you have to trust yourself that you're saying the right thing and that it's going well. And so if you find yourself having conversations where you are doubting your own idea, you find yourself getting in your own head and you don't know if you're articulating it properly, maybe you're losing your train of thought and you're not sure how to go back, those are the micro moments that tend to trip most people up, and that's where their communication skills falter. But when you develop that sense of self-trust of, I will be able to figure it out, even if I detour, I will be able to get back on track. Even if I don't know what I'm talking about in the moment, I can reset and keep going with confidence. When you have that fundamental faith in yourself, it makes your communication so much more effective. Because rather than getting flustered, adding in rambling or more filler words in the moment, you're able to maintain your sense of calm, maintain your cool, and continue going with confidence effectively. Question 3. Sometimes speaking with confidence feels easy, and sometimes speaking feels so hard. Why does that happen? This is such a good question because this is really diving into your key psychological state in each situation. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Our brains do a very good job of categorizing things all the time. Odds are, by now, you have categorized different situations or different contexts into different boxes. Each little box in your mind gives you a different sense of confidence, of anxiety, and a different meaning attached to it. And so if you find yourself in a position where some situations make speaking feel easy and some situations give you so much anxiety, I really want you to stop and reflect on which situations give you anxiety, which situations feel easy, and what are the common patterns that distinguish the two. Here are some things to look for. Some situations may give you more anxiety because you've had more negative experiences with them in the past. I don't want to start getting into childhood, but sometimes you really do start to trace your patterns back to moments in time, situations that you've had since you were a child, things that you were told repetitively, situations that didn't go well over and over and over and have created a pattern and an association with you now. Sometimes it's the expectations themselves. Certain contexts may feel more high stakes or high pressure, and so the expectation, the standards feel much higher. And that alone can add so much self-imposed anxiety. Another thing to look for is for the people who are there. Is it the situation itself, or is it your understanding of who's there and what that person means that gives you the anxiety? If you're someone who works in corporate, maybe you'll resonate with this. Certain team meetings feel easy, especially if it's your team or people that you're very familiar and comfortable with. While other team meetings give you so much anxiety because maybe there's other departments there, or maybe there's other department heads or executives there, and the association you have with what that title means makes you feel like you're more likely to be judged or misunderstood, or that you have to know your stuff at a much higher level simply because someone else is in the meeting. And so it's these little factors based on your personal meaning and definition that change how you feel in different contexts. And so it's not that your skills change, it's that your interpretation of the situation changes. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're recognizing that certain situations have higher expectations, higher standards, and more stakes on the line for you, and you're feeling that pressure, what I want you to start to do is recognize that and then notice if there's any moments or if there's any ways where you can lower some of that pressure. Sometimes that means quite literally reframing your understanding of what is needed in the meeting. And sometimes that means reframing your understanding of how you show up and what is considered to be good enough. One of the best ways to do this, especially if you're in a meeting with other people, is to really step outside of yourself, overcome your anxiety for a moment. Just do your best to breathe through it and redirect your attention. I know, as hard as that can feel. But when you flip the switch and stop worrying about yourself and focus on who else is on the meeting and how they speak and how they carry themselves, what you'll start to notice is that your definition and your expectations of what you should be doing doesn't match what you see other people doing. And if you find yourself worrying that you come across as not confident because of the way you speak in the meeting, and you actually pay attention to how other people speak, what you'll find is that likely many of them use filler words. Some people don't have the answers and, say they'll circle back to it or, follow up in a few days. And when you start to be very conscious about recognizing what the actual standard is, It helps you figure out where you are and set the bar in a more reasonable way. And that alone can help you reduce some of the self-imposed anxiety that you're feeling. Question 4. Why does speaking in front of a camera feel so hard? Help! This is one of my favorite questions to get, because before I started creating content for my own business, I hated recording myself. The very first few pieces of content I recorded were absolutely terrible. I did not know what I was doing. I felt incredibly insecure. I was so self-critical of myself, but eventually I got over it. And I was even able to get myself to a place where I can sit down, press record, and just speak on the fly without having to do 27 retakes of one video. And you can get there yourself as well. The first thing that I want you to recognize is this. Most people feel awkward speaking in front of a camera because they don't do it that often. Before content creation became so normalized, think about what speaking to a camera was associated with. For most people, speaking in front of a camera was something like for a news anchor, for a celebrity, for someone in a movie. It wasn't the norm for most of us, and rather it was associated with these big stages, big lights, big audiences, and big exposure. And that's important because with that association, one of the main reasons people feel so incredibly uncomfortable on camera is because they do feel exposed. They don't feel like themselves. They feel like they're performing. Can you see the similarities? Another reason why recording can feel so awkward is because you become extremely self-conscious and self-focused on yourself. Because there's no one else in the room, maybe if you're on a Zoom call, on a Teams meeting, there might be little squares with other people, but you have no real external feedback and no sort of bouncing board to see how you're doing, how your ideas are landing, and how the other person feels. And so that really emphasizes you, yourself, and you. You become more self-conscious of your facial expression, your body language, your word choice, because you get in your head without that external feedback. And so if recording on camera feels awkward, first of all, again, let me acknowledge that that's totally normal, and it will be for the first few times you do it. When you can simplify it for what it's actually doing for you, it becomes a little bit easier because some of that pressure gets taken off. Now, the second thing that I want you to do, and I love this example and when people actually come back and tell me their results, is I want you to consider what your standards are for speaking on camera. Often we have these standards that we've set for ourselves that we don't actually recognize we've set. And when you begin to verbalize your unconscious expectations, you start to realize why it feels so hard for reasons that you didn't recognize in the moment. Maybe you expect yourself to have a studio quality production. Maybe you expect yourself to have a 4K camera that puts you in amazing light, and then you're self-conscious about every pore on your face. Maybe you expect yourself to have not a single filler word and perfect articulation because that's what you see online, but you haven't recognized that 99.9% of those videos are edited to have all the filler words and natural parts of communication, deleted out. And so when you recognize what your standards are, what I want you to do instead is to go online, to look at the video quality of your competitors, of your peers, of your colleagues, of other people online who are doing well, and to really lower your own standards. And what I mean is this: if you think you need a studio quality production and not a single filler word, go look at some of the live streams of people doing well who are sitting in the dark, whose video's a little bit grainy, who lose their train of thought, drink their coffee every 5 minutes, and ramble away, and people love it, and people resonate with it. And the point here being is that when you recognize what the fear is, when you recognize where it's coming from, when you name the resistance that you're feeling because you suddenly recognize all of these expectations you've placed on yourself, and you see examples of the fact that you don't actually have to do it that way, well, now you have all of this evidence presented to you to help you understand that taking a breath, using a few filler words, and making a few mistakes on video is okay, and you will be fine anyway. And this brings us to our final question. How do I actually improve my communication skills? For this question, I'm going to give you a 3-step process to follow. First thing that I want you to do, if you want to improve your communication skills, I want you to really understand what you mean by that. See, most people want to improve their communication skills. They have a general sense of what good communication means to them. Remember earlier where I talked about the importance of defining what the standard is for you? Same thing here. But here's what most people overlook. Psychologically, we are influenced by the things that we are exposed to repeatedly. When it comes to your communication, there is so much that people overlook that completely influences how you sound and what you think confident communication sounds like. So what I really want you to do is to audit what you are watching, what you are listening to, and who you're talking to on a daily basis. Now, here's what I mean by this. The things that we are exposed to repeatedly define our baseline of what normal is. And so if you're constantly listening to very casual conversational videos and podcasts, maybe you're watching trash reality TV with lots of, not very well articulated thoughts and conversations. If you are speaking with your friends constantly, but you're speaking on the fly and you're thinking out loud and you're using your filler words and kind of articulating as you go while you yell at your kids to, wash their hands before dinner 7 times, your expectation of conversations is very, very different than what you're aiming for. And when you're constantly exposing yourself to these very casual conversational conversations that aren't a reflection of where you want your communication skills to be, what you're doing is indirectly reaffirming this casual conversation in yourself. That's just how our psychology works. And so if you want to improve your communication skills, the very first thing you need to do is audit what you're listening to, what you're watching, and who you're talking to and how you're talking to them. Now, I'm not saying to cut off your friends, family, or partner, but I am saying start to change the way you articulate your thoughts. Start to be more intentional with what you consider to be a good communication habit and implement that and mimic that in your actual day-to-day life. If you'd like to be more articulate, seen more as an expert and an authority, to be seen as someone who can articulate thoughts with credibility on the fly, well then maybe you need to be consuming podcasts that are interview style. Maybe podcasts or videos or shows that have a bit more of that elevated caliber, if you will. Because when you're listening to that on a regular basis, that starts to shift your expectations of what a baseline communication style looks like. And when you shift that baseline expectation, well, now your own standards improve to reflect that. And so if you're listening to content that's very intellectually stimulating with few filler words and individuals really taking the time to articulate their thoughts and support it with arguments, well, that shifts the way that you view your conversations. And now all of a sudden, rather than just perhaps sharing your thoughts, you're learning how to share your thoughts in a way that articulates your point, supports it, backs it up with data, feelings, experiences, and is able to hold that, emotional depth and intellectual stimulation. And so that's the first part. The most overlooked aspect of improving your communication skills is just audit what you're already exposing yourself to. The second part is actually practicing. Just like earlier when we talked about the communication gym, the exact same thing. Either sit down, record yourself, and pick one thing to work on at a time, or practice with a friend. You want to be intentional with putting in the time to practice, to understand what good communication means for you, to define where you lack those skills currently, and then to practice filling in the gap. So if you think someone who's a good communicator can, speak on the fly, articulate their thoughts clearly, organize their thoughts in a way that logically makes sense, and doesn't use filler words while using vocabulary that matches the sort of caliber that they're aiming for, but you feel like you use way too many filler words, your vocabulary is missing, and rather than making point 1, point 2, point 3, you tend to ramble in a circle. Well, now you know exactly where you need to cross-reference and fill in the gaps. But that won't come without the intentional awareness and the depth of understanding around what you want and where you're currently lacking. And practice is the bridge that will merge the two for you. And the third part, the most important step, is I want you to reflect and revise. You see, practicing is fantastic, and practicing will help you improve your skills so much. But it's not enough. Without intentional reflection and revision, practice is kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall just a little bit. It's like, imagine if you went to the gym and your goal was to train for a 5K marathon, and you decided to do the cardio machine because naturally, if you want to train for a 5K marathon, you want to do some cardio and practice running. But maybe you weren't intentional about how much cardio you were doing. If you were pacing yourself, not pacing yourself, sprinting, not sprinting, uphill, recline, anything in between. Maybe you just showed up, you did 20 minutes of cardio, however you were feeling that day, and left. Do you think that would adequately train you for a 5K marathon? Odds are it wouldn't. The exact same thing with your communication skills. It's not enough to just practice and to feel like you're working on your skills without actually being intentional about recognizing what's working, what's not, and where you need to adapt in between. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to sit down, a minute or two is enough, and after you've do your communication for 15 minutes, actually think about what was easy, what was hard, where do I feel like I improved? And the moments where you recognize what was easy, that means you're doing good and you can keep going and you can keep adding in. The moments that were hard means you need more practice or you need different strategies. And so when it comes to your communication, there are so many strategies out there for how to improve your communication skills. That's why I love tackling the psychology behind it, because you need to recognize that not all strategies will work for you. You need to try them and pick the ones that actually match the kind of individual you are, your strengths, your preferences, and your goals. And so without that reflection piece, you'll be missing a lot of this key information. And the revision is what's actually going to help you recognize what's working, what's not, and what you need to tweak. And if a strategy isn't working and you keep trying to push yourself to do it, you're just going to lose all motivation and feel like a failure, when in reality, it's not you that's failing. It's the strategy that's just mismatched for who you are. And so to actually improve your communication skills, start to pay attention to what you surround yourself with and what your normal communication skills look like. Understand your baseline and then recognize if you need to elevate it or not. Then start exposing yourself to intentional time to practice. Put in those reps in your own communication gym, and then reflect and revise as needed. Treat your communication skills the same way you would a workout, a hobby, or any other skill you want to improve, and you will. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any other frequently asked questions you'd like me to answer, go ahead, drop them down below, email me, reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.